Hi students, hope you are doing well. So in continuation with my previous video on the topic training, this is the next part. So let's start today's session. So before proceeding further, let us see what are the things we covered earlier. So these were the things we covered in our previous video. There is facts about training. We discussed what is training, need for training, training versus development, then importance of training, a checklist to avoid training pitfalls, and what are the types of training. So let us see now what are the learning objectives of today's video. First, we will be discussing about developing a training program, how to develop a training program, what are the methods to develop a training program. Then we will be discussing regarding different training methods, what are the different training methods. Then AD model will focus on AD model. This is an interesting model. Then at last, we will be discussing on indicators of training effectiveness. So how to understand the effectiveness of training program, how to analyze the effectiveness of training program. So these are our today's learning objectives. So let us see first. Now, what are the steps in developing a training program? What should be the appropriate steps to develop a training program, right? So let us see. First, first is that identification of training needs. First thing first we need to do that we'll have to identify the training needs in an organizational context. So how to identify the training needs? See, you can identify training needs depending on the views of the line managers, depending on the performance appraisal. We covered this topic in our classroom. Performance appraisal, then company and departmental various plans, depending on the departmental plans, depending on the views of the manager, analysis of different job difficulties. So in this way you can identify whether there is need of training, right? Then what is the next step? Next step is that setting training objectives. That means what are the objectives of our training? We are going to give training. We are going to implement, if we are going to implement a training program, so what would be the objectives of this training? The objectives may be, your objective may be maybe to impart induction to the new employees, to give basic knowledge about the procedure, to enhance the skill of the employees so that they perform effectively. Okay, so what would be the appropriate objective of your training session? That you will have to identify. Then next, designing training methods. That means by in which method you'll give the training, you'll implement the training. So the methods, certain methods are there. We'll cover shortly. One by one we'll be covering, right? So we'll have to design the training methods, appropriate training methods. Then administration of training program. Administration of training program, that means administration of training program such as types of the training program, what would be the location of the training, what would be the training budget, lead time of the training. So these you'll have to administer, okay, for a training program. Last, the most important thing is that evaluation of training. Evaluation of training, that means analyzing the worth of the activity, right? So these are the steps in developing a training program. Next, so as we talked about right now, that designing training methods. So what are the training methods? What are the training methods by which applying which we can design training program, right? There are certain methods. First, two types of methods are there. One is on-the-job training and another one is off-the-job training. So what is on-the-job training? On-the-job training is the training which will provide at the workplace, at the actual workplace. The training which would be provided at the actual workplace. And what is off-the-job training program? Off-the-job training program, that means the training which would be provided outside of the actual work location. Okay, outside of the work location. So here we have jotted down some differences between the on-the-job training and off-the-job training program. Here you can go through it. See, as I told you earlier, that on-the-job training program is that which will provide at the workplace, and off-the-job that outside of the work location, right? Then what would be the approach? Basically, on-the-job training program, the approach would be practical, and for the off-the-job training program, the approach generally approach is theoretical approach is adopted. Active participation for on-the-job training program, yes, active participation is there. For off-the-job training program, generally active participation doesn't happen. You think about your classroom. How many students in a class, they attend the lecture attentively? That is a question. Okay, though most of the students attend the lecture sessions attentively, but few of the students are there. You cannot expect from few students active participation. It's like that of the job training program, right? So location it is as we discussed earlier, at the workplace, and for of the job, away from the workplace. Principles, what are the principles? Learning by performing. That means learn while you're performing. And of the job training program principle is learning by acquiring knowledge. Okay, work disruption. This is another important point. Work disruption. Work disruption means, in case of on-the-job training program, work disruption doesn't happen because you'll be given training at the workplace. Generally, it doesn't happen, work disruption. But in case of off-the-job training program, work disruption happens. You may have to stop the production. You may have to stop the actual process, to give training to the trainees. Okay. Generally, on-the-job training program is carried out by the experienced employees, and off-the-job training program is carried out by the professional or experts. Cost, as this kind of training would be given at the workplace, so the cost of this training program is a bit inexpensive. But in case of off-the-job training program, the cost would be expensive. Why? Because you may have to arrange separate classrooms, separate location. You may have to arrange a lot of things. You may have to give some kind of salary, you may say, or something you may have to give to the experts. Okay, who will be taking the training, right? And basically, on-the-job training, it is suitable for manufacturing firms, and the off-the-job training, it is suitable for non-manufacturing firms. I hope you have understood it. Now, okay. So these are the examples. These are the examples of different training methods. These are the examples of on-the-job training method, and these are the examples of off-the-job training method. But in case of on-the-job training method, job rotation, coaching, job instruction, step-by-step training, committee assignment. These are the types of on-the-job training method. And vestibule training, role-playing, lecture method, conference, program instruction. These are the examples of the job training program. So we'll discuss one by one. So first we will be focusing on the job training methods. Okay. So in case of on-the-job training method, first method is job rotation. So by the name itself, we can understand that job rotation means movement of the trainee from one job to another job. While the trainee will do this kind of movement from another job to from one job to another job, obviously the trainee will receive some job knowledge, will gain different experiences from different supervisors or different trainers. So his or her knowledge and skill would be enhanced. So by rotating the jobs, you can train the employees. Next is coaching method. In case of coaching method, this is you people are familiar with this term, coaching. So in case of coaching method, one coach or a supervisor would be assigned as a coach to train the individual workers or individual trainee. So the supervisor will provide feedback on the performance of the trainees, will offer some suggestions for future improvement. Okay. Now, job instruction. Job instruction is also popularly known as step-by-step training method. Step-by-step training method. Under this method, what happens? Trainer explains the trainee the way of doing job step by step, so that his knowledge and skill can be enhanced. So this all we are discussing on the job training. Another type of on the job training is committee assignment. In case of committee assignment, what happens? A group of trainee are given a particular problem. A group of trainee would be given a particular problem, and they would be asked to solve the actual problem. The trainee will solve the problem jointly, and what happens? It develops a teamwork among the trainees. So these are few methods of on-the-job training method. Now let us discuss off-the-job training. Off-the-job training, that means the training which will be given away from the job, away from the actual job. Okay, like lectures. You all know this method, lecture method. In this lecture method, what happens? A classroom or training room can be arranged. Few trainees will attend lecture which would be given by the experts. Mainly it is done for the white collar workers or managerial level employees in an organization. Next, vestibule training. In case of this training, what happens? The another name of the training is near the job training. In this training, what happens? A simulated setup is established proximate to the main production plant. Simulated setup means look-alike setup would be established, which would be proximate to the main production. Here mainly what happens? Here technical staffs, they learn how to operate the tools, how to operate the machineries. It is mainly for technical staffs, so that they have better understanding regarding the operation of the tools and machineries. Next method of the job training, role playing. You might have done it in your course curriculum also. You might have done role playing. In case of role playing, what happens? In case of this training, what happens? Different role would be assigned to the different trainees, and they would be given particular problem. And by playing this kind of act, they'll try to solve the problem. That is why it is called role playing. And another name of role playing, it is the another names are role reversal, sociodrama, psychodrama, you can say. I hope this is clear to you all. Next, this is called AD model of training. It is actually AD model. It's actually instructional system design model. It is a generic process traditionally used by the training developers, right? So 5 steps are there. See here, you can say analyze, design, development, implementation, evaluation. So these are the 5 steps of this model. Okay, so this provides kind of flexible guideline to build effective training program. Right? So here you can say the things are described here, like analyze. Analyze, that means you'll have to assess the need of the training, analyze the training program. Okay, assessing the business goals. What are the business goals? Conducting business need analysis, identifying knowledge gap, whether there is any knowledge gap, which is required and which is already there in the employees. So this knowledge gap you will have to identify. Then audience analysis would be the audience, that means who would be the trainees. Okay, and developing a learning objectives. What would be the learning objectives of this training, right? Then next step is the design. Designing, that means designing the training program. Designing means here identifying instructional design strategy, then selecting delivery method, how we'll deliver the training, then determining training structure and duration, what will be the duration of the training, establishing evaluation method, how the training would be, how the training would be evaluated, then developing storyboards and media, right? Then development. Next step is the development. So development in this case, what happens? You have to develop, creating. You'll have to create prototype, developing training material, completing a tabletop view. Okay, running a training pilot. That means pilot training, demo training. You can say you'll have to conduct first. Then implementation. You have to implement. You have planned a lot of things, but if you do not implement the in reality, what happens? Nothing will happen. So implementation, that means establishing training schedule, printing and preparing training material. You may have to give some kind of training material to the trainees. Okay, so you'll have to print and you'll have to prepare. First you'll have to prepare and then print the training material, then printing preparing trainers for delivery. Okay, notifying and enrolling the learners, then launching the course. Okay, then last step is evaluation. Evaluation means you'll have to evaluate the worth of the training program. So evaluation means collecting training evaluation data, reviewing training effectiveness, how much the training was, to what extent the training was effective, assessing the project performance, and reporting performance result. You'll have to report the performance result at last. Okay. Okay. So you can see here in short, we have jotted down everything in detail. This is for your reference. Next, indicators of training effectiveness. So how you will understand to what extent the training was effective. So these are the indicators of training effectiveness. See, from here you can see. Okay. So these are the indicators of training effectiveness. First, in this format, you can see that before and after score, there is a provision of before and after score. So before implementing the training program, what are the scores of the employees? Like confidence, like accepting, to what extent he is accepting the suggestions, what is his politeness in his behavior, what would be the criteria. It can be customized according to your needs. Okay, whether it's punctual or not, whatever may be. Human relation. So what is the before score and what are the after score? If you see that the after score means the score after implementing the training program, if it increases, then you can understand that your training was worthy, your training was fruitful. But if you see, after assessing the employees, if you see that the scores are not up to the mark, either if the scores are same or the scores will not go down. If the scores remain same or if it increases to some extent, what will happen? Whatever you have incurred for your training program, that means it has gone in vain. So by assessing this, this kind of format, you can say, you can assess the effectiveness of the training program. So for today we are ending this video here. So in my next lecture session we'll be covering different topics, and we'll come back shortly. Thank you for your patience.